Next up on the show, Steve from Hot Springs. How can I better understand my risk tolerance? I sometimes struggle with the fear of losing money while also experiencing fear of losing opportunities. I'm 34, so it's not like I need to tap into retirement money soon. Not terribly uncommon, Steve, even at 34 years old. You know, there have been studies that show the millennial generation really struggling with the idea of stock market losses or stock losses in their portfolios. And a lot of them have seen what their parents went through in 2008, 2009, and that effect on them. There's a lot of reasons for it. So the psychology behind it we get, but you're on track here thinking about 34. You don't need to tap the retirement money soon, and you have to adopt that mindset. We've oftentimes seen people of this age too, John, come to us and maybe later in life, and they'll tell us a story of how they changed jobs when they were 34, let's say, and they raided their 401k. They went and took it to pay off some debt or to buy some boat or whatever the case may be. Now, if you've lost in the stock market and then you withdraw the money and you take the penalties and taxes on that, you really set yourself back on your path to true financial independence. But let's get back to the risk tolerance question. You know, risk tolerance, it's something we address with our clients because you do create an investment strategy partially based on that, right? The client's expectations, what they can handle, but nobody wants to lose money.
Right.
The investment objective that is assigned to your account does not necessarily help you feel better at night about losing money in the stock market.
It doesn't. And here's what you have to understand about this. Building a risk tolerance is a little like building muscle. There's some pain involved, but there is a great benefit to that pain if you're willing to go through it. And so when you see your account balance go down, you have to have the proper perspective on what you're doing. That is, you know, the old saying, Scott, no pain, no gain. That's the same thing here in terms of investing. And so I think that, first of all, Steve, this is a process. You're not going to flip a switch and suddenly get comfortable with risk. You've got to kind of ease into it. And I think that is a process over time. One of the most important factors in dealing with risk is the element of time. You have to understand that most of the wounds that you could ever get in investing in stocks or equities or the market or whatever you want to call it is going to be healed by the evolution of time. Time has the ability, if you take a look at how time factors into this equation, it's really almost magical that if you just leave it alone, then most of the time it's going to work out for you. Steve is 34, and it sounds like that he's talking about retirement, so he's got to have the right perspective. Scott, we've got a graphic that I want to walk through with everyone. This is the S&P 500, the best and worst returns, all the way from 1926 to 2022. And this really does prove the point I was just making. If you look at any one year, the market could go up. Historically, it's gone up as much as like 52.6%. But it has also gone down as much as 43.8% in any one given year. So pretty wide swing there. About, you know, you could lose 50% on the upside or 50%, not lose 50%. You could get 50% return on the upside. You could get nearly 50% return negatively on the downside in 1 year. Well, let's go out 5 years. If you look at 5 years, best case scenario has been 28.3%. Worst case scenario has been about negative 12%. So your downs are not nearly as far down if you go out 5 years. Well, let's go out 10 years. Well, in the history of the S&P 500, all the way from 1926 to 2022, you're looking at a positive return, highest positive return average about 20.1% over those 10 years, and the lowest at negative 1.7%. Go out 15 years and there's almost no loss and an 18.8% return. Go out 20 years, there is no loss. It's a positive 2.4% and the highest at 17.7. So what you see is that this is evolving over time and the losses diminish the further out on that timeline you go.
We produce a video every week called The Fastest 4 Minutes in Finance, and it is oftentimes, John, focused on the market and the economy and what's coming down the pike in the next 6 to 12 months, and all that's important to prepare for. But we almost always end those discussions by saying, remember, the bottom line here is that stocks are long-term investments used to meet long-term financial goals, so you cannot make a short-term decision based on those numbers you just provided there on a 1 year or even 3 year basis. And I think the other thing I would say to Steve here from Hot Springs is when it comes to the risk tolerance, it is oftentimes because you're focused on the account value. And I would suggest to younger investors especially, it gets harder when those sums of money, those account balances are bigger when you get to retirement, and certainly your investment strategy does need to change as you get closer to withdrawing that money. But when you're in your 30s, even into your 40s, the focus should not really be on your account value because any losses in that account are unrealized. You haven't sold anything. It is a number on a page until you choose to sell something. So your fear can be basically a self-fulfilling prophecy if you act on it. But really what you should be focused, John, on rather than the account balance is accumulating shares of whatever investment you're purchasing.
Yeah, Steve needs to get a copy of the cow story from us. I don't even know if we have that video still around these days, but the cow story basically teaches dollar cost averaging. Steve needs to be focused on the number of shares that is in his account, not what the value of those shares are. If you're growing a larger and larger and larger number of shares, then you are headed in the right direction. And eventually, as time goes on and you allow this time value of money thing to play itself out, and the long-term nature of the stock market and how the market has the propensity of healing most every wound that you could ever imagine, then that actually is a recommendation that we would make to Steve to educate yourself about things like dollar cost averaging and the accumulation of shares, because you're really not selling anything if you're focused on retirement. Really, all your 401k statement is good for right now is either a bragging statement or, something to commiserate about, but it has really no bearing on where you're going from an investment standpoint.
He does mention, we'll kind of wrap this up with this, it can work the other way too. He says that he has sometimes a fear of lost opportunity. I think those really work against each other. If you are fearful of losing money and you're hesitant and you haven't stayed on track and you've kind of gone in and you've gone out and you've missed some of the upside of the market, you can start to feel like you have to catch up. And what does that cause you to do? It causes you to read those papers of those hot stocks, right? This guy's got the best stock tips, and if I just get this, I'm going to make 100% of my money, or I'm going to get into digital currency, or whatever the case may be, and that can the fear of lost opportunity can cause you to take too much risk on.
Yeah, it absolutely can. And I think the other thing that I would say to Steve is that if you have a purpose of what you're doing, then stay focused on that purpose. Don't worry about all the noise that's going on in the financial media, because frankly, a lot of the financial media puts clickbait out there and they want you to be fearful of what's going on so you will come back and find out the next big disaster that's about to happen. Stay focused on your goals. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't worry about the day-to-day movements or the week-to-week or month-to-month movements in the market. Worry about accumulating those shares and getting to where you want to go.